The emergency room had learned to move without music. The fluorescent hum, the sharp hiss of oxygen, the steady, indifferent beep of monitors. Justin lay pale under a sheet that had been lifted from his chest and folded back like a small white flag. A team of clinicians worked in rehearsed silence around him, voices clipped into orders and confirmations. Someone called time, and the flatline seemed to take a breath of its own and stop. Through the glass behind the head of the stretcher, a small figure pressed its face to the pane. A capuchin no larger than a satchel, dark eyes wide, fur damp with the backstage sweat. It scrabbled, then shrieked, a high, urgent sound that cut through the sterile rhythm and sent the nearest nurse toward the door. If you care about stories of loyalty and surprising heroism, stay with this one. Hit subscribe and like. It's worth the watch. After the quick click of the CTA, the room resumed its choreography. The chief physician checked lines, the nurse called a time, and a paramedic, still in a hoodie with a tourniquet looped over his shoulder, explained what had arrived from backstage. A collapse minutes after the encore, a pale face, shallow breathing. Social feeds had already begun to blink accusations, an overdose here, a staged faint there, while the staff did what they could with the facts at hand. Justin's manager hovered at the periphery, jaw tight, phone inert in his fist. The monkey, Momo, pounded the glass until a security guard pried the door and scooped the animal into his arms, protecting it as if the tiny creature had been a child. Justin had been on his feet for hours pre-show, adrenaline and lights pushing him through a set. Earlier that night, he'd laughed as Momo mimicked his dance moves in the dressing room, a pet and talisman who'd traveled with him across airports and stages. Nobody had noticed the small brown shape that had slipped from the supply crate into the corner of the room, an unseen hazard hiding in the fold of an opened rude case. In the whirlwind of pack-downs and cheering fans, something had bitten him, an innocuous pain swallowed by the surge of the show. Seconds later, the pain had returned, deeper, and then the world had gone quiet around the roar. They were about to wheel him into radiology when Momo began to pull at Justin's sleeve with an insistence that made the nurse laugh first, then frown. The monkey's fingers worried at the cuff, tugging until the thin fabric rode back, and the nurse, distracted and amused, glanced at the forearm beneath. At first it was nothing but the smallness of a bruise, a faint redness, easily dismissed. Momo would not be dismissed. He made a sound between a chirp and a bark, then reached and nudged the skin with a dexterity that looked almost human. He scraped lightly and recoiled, then pressed his forehead against the arm as if smelling a secret. The clinician who had examined Justin minutes before stepped closer, the room tightening its focus. Under the sleeve, a tiny puncture lay almost invisible in the washed light, a pinpoint of redness the size of a pencil tip. The charge of the moment slowed. The beeps inched toward audible, slower than before. And someone found a Doppler. Someone else measured a pulse that had thinned, and then, with the attention shifted and the right line of treatment readied, came back into a steadier rhythm. Antivenom was called for and administered. Oxygen masked the flatness of shallow breaths. Fluids marched in through a new IV. The diagnosis shifted like weather. Where panic had assumed an overdose, the clinicians found a venomous envenomation, an unexpected vector in the chaos of a tour. No one in the room pretended to have been perfect. The senior doctor later said they had worked with the information they had, history, vitals, the blankness of a collapsed patient, and had moved quickly. What changed the course, quietly and suddenly, was a small animal's insistence, a creature that refused to leave until something was right. The headlines that snapped across the internet the next morning still leaned toward narrative. Stage scare, star collapses. But the video clip of Momo pawing and then revealing the arm rewired public curiosity. The accusation threads that had braided themselves through comment sections to cancel him started to fray as people watched the real-time undoing of assumption. Justin came back slowly. His first coherent movement was a blink, then a hand that sought the monkey's head and found it, fingers curling around the animal's warm neck. He whispered a thank you that the room somehow understood more deeply than the press releases. In the hospital's quieter hours, with lights softened and machines ticking like distant metronomes, he sat and let Momo climb into his lap, small weight against a chest that had feared silence. He thought about the suddenness of judgment he'd seen online, how quickly an absence of context becomes a verdict, and how a creature without language had been clearer than the loudest rumor. The public response altered tone. Reporters who had once posed questions for cancellation now filmed a tiny monkey accepted among flowers at a press conference. Children drew Momo with a cape, and posted murals appeared on social feeds. The small brown figure towering beside a scribbled Justin, hands around a heart. The police-style PR machinery that greets celebrity crises was replaced by quieter moments. A donation from the tour to animal rescue charities. A note from Justin promising to slow down, to listen. Fans made bracelets. Late-night hosts softened their jokes. For Justin, the change lodged not in statements but in small behaviors. He began to travel with one fewer entourage member and one more attentive mind. He learned to check small spaces in dressing rooms. He began to read the body language of those who could not speak. Animals, nervous stagehands, exhausted crew. At a benefit a month later, he spoke with a brevity that felt new. "I nearly lost everything because someone decided a silence meant something it didn't. Momo didn't care about headlines. He cared." He lifted the monkey, and for once, the flashbulbs were not the point. The gratitude in that room was not performative. It hummed like the gentle thrum of a recovered pulse. There was a broader lesson, too, for those who had been quick to judge. Evidence could be smaller than a trending hashtag. Truth sometimes arrived on a paw. The story of a near cancellation turned rescue became one of the quietest kind of celebrity salvage. A reminder that humility often arrives delivered by the least likely messenger. Justin's career weathered the storm not because of PR alone, but because a living, breathing insistence redirected expert hands at a crucial minute. Months later, when he signed autographs and posed for pictures, fans would point to a keychain at his belt, a tiny carved monkey, and he would tap it with a smile that had learned the contour of a new reserve. He no longer assumed he knew every danger, or that every silence meant the same thing. He learned, with a small, stubborn animal at his side, to pay attention to the little alarms that do not make the trending lists, but save lives all the same. If this story moved you, consider sharing it. Subscribe for more true, unexpected tales of loyalty, and give a like to the smallest heroes among us.